Hey there, in this video we're going to talk about solving a two-step equation where there is division and subtraction. Okay, so we're solving our two-step equations. Our first step will always be to isolate the term with the variable in it, and the second step will always be to isolate the variable itself. We do both of those steps with using the same process of the opposite function, same number. If you see addition, you subtract. If you subtract, you add. If it's multiplied, you divide. If it's divided, you multiply. You're just doing the opposite of what you see. All right, so you have to recognize as to what functions you're dealing with. Okay, remember our goal is to have the variable itself, whatever variable it is, equals a number. So let's look at our first example. X divided by 2 minus 3 equals 11. So if we look at this, our first step is to isolate the term with the variable in it. So the red circle is around the x divided by 2, which is the term that has the variable in it. So we have to get rid of everything that's not in the red circle, but on that side of the equation. So the red circle is being subtracted by 3. How do we undo subtract by 3? The opposite of subtraction is addition. So we're going to add 3 to both sides of the equation because we have to make sure that the equation remains balanced. We don't want it to be off kilter one way or the other. So these 3's will end up canceling each other out. The x divided by 2 remains equals 11 plus 3, which gives me 14. Now, our second step tells us to isolate the variable itself. So there's the protective force field around the x. What is happening to the force field and the x? It is being divided by 2. How do I undo division by 2? We multiply by 2. We're going to multiply by 2 on both sides. So those 2's will cancel each other out. I'm left with the x equals 14 times 2, which gives me 28. Gives me my final answer. X divided by 4 minus 9 equals 25. So the term that has the variable in it is the x minus 4, x divided by 4. So what's not in the circle? It would be the minus 9. How do I undo minus 9? I add 9. We're going to add 9 to both sides of the equation. The two 9's there will cancel each other out. X divided by 4 equals 25 plus 9, which is 34. There's the variable. It's in its protective shell. So what's happening to it? It's being divided by 4. So how do we undo divide by 4? We multiply by 4. So we're going to multiply by 4 on both sides. That is our opposite function with the same number. So we cross out our 4's because they cancel each other out. X equals 34 times 4, which becomes 136. So now we're going to look at our last example. And we have x divided by negative 3 minus 12 equals 36. And some of you are probably looking at this and saying, wait a minute, that negative doesn't belong to the 3. Well, you're right, but you're not right. So what we're going to do is if I give the negative to the x, that's going to give me an additional step to have to do on the end. Okay, and we want to make as few steps as we possibly can. That's going to make it a multi-step equation instead of a two-step equation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the negative off of the very front of this expression and put it with the 3. I'm allowed to do that because in order for this to be negative, okay, that means one of these two terms has to be negative. So if I automatically make the 3 negative, that way I don't have to worry about whether or not the x is negative. All right. So here is my term that has the variable in it, x divided by negative 3. It is being subtracted by 12. How do I undo subtract 12? I'm going to add 12. Add 12 to both sides. The 12's will cancel out. X divided by negative 3 equals 36 plus 12, which is 48. There's the variable. That's the magic one that I'm looking for. Okay, what's happening to it? It's being divided by negative 3. So since it's being divided by negative 3, I'm going to multiply by negative 3. I'm going to undo what the problem tells me that it wants to do. Multiply by negative 3. Those two negative 3's will cancel each other out. I'm left with x equals positive times a negative is a negative. 48 times 3 gives me a total of 144. Now, there may be one or two of you out there that are asking, well, how do I make sure that my answer is correct? Glad you asked. What we're going to do is we're going to take our answer from our first problem, and we're actually going to plug it back into our original problem to verify that it works. So we start with our problem, x divided by 2 minus 3 equals 11. And then we're going to take the 28 and we're going to plug it in for the x. So I've got 28 divided by 2 minus 3 equals 11. So 28 divided by 2 gives me 14. Minus 3 equals 11. And 14 minus 3 gives me 11 equals 11. Since I have the same thing on both sides of the equation, that tells me that my solution of a 28 for that value of x in that equation is correct. Okay? Isolate the term with your variable. Isolate the variable itself. That's step 1 and step 2. You do so by opposite function, same number. Good luck. Thank you.